Thank you very much. It's so great to be among friends and family in Worcester, a place that I still absolutely 100% consider home. So thank you for that, Joe, and Tim as well. So just under 2 years ago, in the middle of that 9 feet of snow in 3 weeks, I found myself 45 feet above Boston Harbor on the roof of our brewery in 5-degree weather with 50 other Harpoon employees. The call had gone out from our maintenance manager that we needed to get snow off the roof before the next storm. That was it. Within minutes, all those employees were bundled up with shovels in hand. Everyone was working hard, but there was a constant conversation and laughter. I looked around and said to myself, this is why I'm doing this. I'm doing this for them, and they're doing it for me and for each other. I often find that thought running through my head at Harpoon events. And to me, it's always important to know my why and to understand that it will change over time. But back to the beginning more than 30 years ago, how does a boy from Worcester, raised by 2 teetotaling parents, end up in the vanguard of the American craft beer revolution? Well, the short answer is friends, luck, and hard work, but sadly for all of you, you're not getting the short answer tonight. It won't be too bad. In the fall of 1985, I found myself back in Boston after 3 years in Chicago, where I worked for a large bank and earned my MBA during the evenings. I was still working for the First National Bank of Chicago, but in their Boston regional office. And one thing that I knew about my career in banking was that it had to come to an end. I wasn't that good. I had graduated from college in 1982, mightily armed for the workforce with a degree in American history. When I got back to Boston, I reconnected with my old college pal, Rich Doyle, who was in his second year of business school and working on an independent research project on the new micro-brewing movement that was just then gaining traction in the Pacific Northwest. That got Rich and me talking about beer. You see, I had always really liked beer. Thank you, Leitrim's. I was going to say Newton Hill, but I didn't think many of you would get that. After college, both Rich and I had spent summers backpacking around Western Europe and had come back loudly lamenting that all the great variety and choice that existed there was strangely absent here. Here it was light yellow lagers from coast to coast, a veritable sea of non-choice. You had the nationals, of course, like Bud Miller and Coors, but even all the still existing regional beers like Narragansett, Stroh, Old Style, and Olympia were also light yellow lagers. In addition, there were no local breweries. The only breweries were big factories somewhere out on the interstate. It was a bleak, boring landscape, and sadly, beer had become a commodity. Contrast that scene with what existed at the time in Europe, where beer was alive. Breweries were in beautiful old buildings, frequently right in the middle of town, with beer halls and beer gardens abounding. As for styles, they were endless, and they all had a great sense of history behind them. Stouts, porters, ales, bitters, casks, sours, lambics, pilsners, hefeweizens, dunkels, etc., etc., etc. I was like a kid in a candy store. And to think, little did I know, but I was really doing very serious career research at the time. By the mid-1980s, there were stirrings of consumers wanting more choice in a number of consumer product categories. In coffee, a new company called Starbucks was spreading eastwards. If you could believe it, as my father used to say, they expected people to pay $2 for a cup of coffee. In Boston, a local roaster named Coffee Connection was doing the same thing, and consumers were enthusiastic about the new choices. The ice cream market was seeing the same development, with small upstarts like Ben & Jerry's taking on the established mass market brands. The key for us was the growth in imported beers. Between 1972 and 1985, imported beer sales had grown from approximately 1 million barrels to just under 10 million barrels, or from less than 1% of the market to close to 5%, explosive growth by any measure. This did 2 things for us. First, it established a price point 50% higher than the existing domestic premium market. Secondly, it made clear to us that American consumers were looking for more choice. We could not have profitably brewed without the price points established by import suppliers. And real opportunity existed because beer is a perishable product that is best consumed when fresh. We could easily beat the imports at providing fresh local beer to New England. So the answer to my first why, as in why did I want to start a brewery, was to try and change the New England and then the U.S. beer market, to change beer from being a commodity into something distinctive, regional, interesting, and exciting. It's amazing when you're young how naive you can be, right? Of course we could change an entire industry led by entrenched multi-billion-dollar industrial breweries. But with business plan in hand, we set out to raise money and successfully did so from 35 individuals to the tune of $430,000. Several, I'm very proud to say, were from right here in the Worcester area. And one of our most important partnerships has been with Joe and the Atlas team. Atlas was our first wholesaler. They were also Sam Adams' first wholesaler. When you talk about pioneers and visionaries in the industry, Atlas is absolutely one of them. We had been turned down by wholesalers in the Boston area. So it was an incredibly important milestone for us to have someone say yes to selling Harpoon Ale. And Joe Solois and many of his team are in the audience tonight, and I'd like to publicly thank them for their 30-year partnership. This will catch your attention, right? You learn early on in starting a business that while your business plan might have helped you organize your thinking and raising money, it is really of very limited use in preparing you for the day-to-day challenges. You just have to learn a way to get things done. One afternoon during our first summer, our young brewer came out of the lab with a serious look on his face and said, "Hey, have you guys tasted the beer we just racked?" I forgot what we were doing at the time, maybe installing the bottling line or continuing to fill kegs. In any event, we said no. He went on to say that something seemed different about it. That got our attention. You see, that evening, we were trying to make our first big splash in the Boston market by renting a Boston Harbor cruise ship for an evening sail with 400-plus bartenders, waiters, and waitresses. And the beer we had just racked was the only beer we had to serve that evening. Everything else was gone or was still in our cellars. We stopped what we were doing and went to sample the beer, and it tasted like it had been brewed with pool water. We called it the medicine brew. Well, we faced a dilemma. What could we do? It was a beautiful day. We had 400 important people showing up in 3 hours. Should we cancel it? The beer really was different when we tasted it. What could we do to fix or at least mask the problem? Well, we came up with the classic American approach. We turned all the refrigeration units down to 32 degrees versus a normal 38. The beer would be ice cold, and that hides lots of issues. In the end, the night was a great success, and we did not hear one complaint about the beer or comments that it tasted different other than it's like, guys, that was just, the beer was a little bit colder than usual. As I said, we've just figured out ways to get things done. Regarding the medicine brew, we subsequently learned that the MWRA had been dealing with an algae bloom at the Wachusett Reservoir and had dumped extra chlorine in the water, hence the pool water flavor. Well, we immediately bought a charcoal filter that removes all chlorine and have never had the issue since. And the second thing we did is we got on the MWRA's contact list to call us when they were changing the water supply. And today we have one of the best QC departments in the craft beer industry. So the motto is you brew and you learn. The key was to set the right tone early. We focused on culture before we had ever heard the word applied to business. We built our business on honesty, hard work, and treating our fellow employees as we wanted to be treated. Nothing radical in any of that, and I feel confident saying that most people in this room conduct themselves in business in the same way. What has struck me over my now lengthy career is how important it is to both set the right tone early and to constantly reinforce it as you grow and years pass. I'll tell a short story in one small way that we reinforce a good lesson from our early days. In our first few years, as Joe alluded, we certainly struggled. We had no heat or air conditioning in our offices. In the winter, we would hold sales meetings in the men's room, which had a baseboard heater. Our lawyer liked us and let us use one of their conference rooms for our quarterly meetings. He knew we were tight on money and let us know that we could help ourselves to office supplies after he left the room at the end of our meetings. Well, we did, and an enduring habit developed. To this day, we have never bought pens at Harpoon. No, we no longer take them from our lawyer's office. Our people quickly learn how many hotels, conferences, and businesses give pens away for free as promotional items and to always take a few to bring back to the office. It has become customary for people to return from conferences and dump a half dozen pens on our CFO's desk. In response, he has established the monthly Finance IPA, which stands for Increased Profits Award, that goes to an employee who has come up with a great way to save the company money. Each month, the winner gets a pen provided for free by somebody else. And I'm looking around here because I expect the next month award is either going to be Holy Cross or the Worcester Economic Club. I'm not sure who it's going to be yet. You'll get some publicity. So you might very well ask the question, how hard is it to work for a company whose mission is to make great beer fun? Get behind that, however, and what is a Harpoon culture? How successful were we in establishing the right tone? Well, we have a short list of philosophies that underline how we run our business. Treat others as we would like to be treated ourselves. Work like an owner and think like a customer. And make great beer and revel in it, or as we say to the rest of the world, love beer, love life. It is essential for a business to be able to answer the question why. After all, consumers buy our beer not just or even primarily because of the liquid in the bottle. They buy it because of who we are and what we stand for. What we do and how we do it have to emanate from why we do what we do. Lots of breweries make great beer. Lots of breweries promote fun. Some of it stupid fun, some of it witty and irreverent. We don't know of any other craft brewery that has made the combination of great beer and fun so central to its core. Award-winning beers, creating new beer styles, strict code dating, huge festivals, athletic events, the Beer Hall in Boston, Riverbend Taps in Vermont, top-ranked brewery tours, a way we promote charitable giving via Harpoon Helps, etc. These activities speak to our why. As I said earlier, being ready for your why to change is key. Knowing my why became crucial again just under 3 years ago. If my initial reason for wanting to co-found a brewery was to change the U.S. beer market, remember that dreaming big stuff, what was it in late 2013? Certainly we had exceeded our goal to change the industry, as the U.S. by that point had become the most exciting place in the world to be a beer drinker. After 28 years in business together, my partner decided he wanted a change and a liquidity event. He was certainly entitled to that. He wanted to either sell to a strategic buyer or bring in a PE firm and then in a few years go public, or sell to a strategic buyer. He put a great deal of pressure on me to agree to that strategy. So again, I had to answer the question, why was I in business? Was it just to sell the company and deposit a very large check? Did my responsibilities end there? Well, this is where my Worcester values really kicked in. You see, I was raised by some pretty amazing people. Not just my parents, but plenty of teachers, neighbors, and friends from this area showed me how to live a life fulfilled by their examples. I have been further blessed to have worked with some amazing people in my career who have reinforced these values. For this crowd on this night, I'm really comfortable calling them Worcester values. The late, great Bill O'Brien, CEO of Hanover Insurance and my father's closest friend, encapsulated and articulated many of these values. He defined values as that part of human nature that an individual believes to be important and right. Bill also believed that a career is an opportunity to find a purposeful and significant life and to contribute to the well-being of others. With people like Bill and my parents as mentors, I try to always remember that if those at the top of an organization do not cultivate character and virtue, then no one will. And no set of rules or corporate culture will ever compensate. So it's late 2013, and my partner and I could not agree on the future of the business. The times are pretty crazy in craft beer, with sky-high valuation and deals being announced almost weekly. As we each own just under 45% of the company, neither of us could easily force the other's hand. So I suggested that we convene a meeting with our other 6 shareholders who collectively owned 11% of the company, 2 outside directors and 4 senior managers, and treat them like a jury. We would each present our vision for the future of the brewery and ask them to render a verdict. My proposal was that instead of selling the company, we borrow money, set up an employee stock ownership plan, and give my partner shares to our employees. But I didn't want to do this without the full support of the other directors and the senior managers in the business. In March of 2014, we met with them and made our cases. It was a very emotional day at Harpoon. Rich and I had been partners for 28 years. In addition, the people on that jury were put in a very challenging position. They had all known the two of us for decades, and two of the senior managers reported to Rich and two reported to me. In addition, everyone in the group stood to make a good deal of money pretty quickly if they supported my partner's position. And to top it off, he offered each of the managers some additional cash out of his own proceeds if they supported his position. Yeah, it was a stressful day. After 2 hours of deliberations, the vote came back 6-0 to support moving to employee ownership. The leadership team answered why in a manner consistent with our values. The team answered that way because we had collectively built a culture based on great values that led to that decision, from the brew house all the way to the board of directors. We aren't in business just to maximize our payout. We're in business to make great beer, bring people together, create long-term value, and provide an environment for everyone at Harpoon to work hard and share in the financial success of the company. So the why had changed, but the values had not. The dream became a reality, not just for my partner, myself, and our investors, but now 200 employees are full participants. We're making capitalism a team sport. So we assembled a group of 5 banks led by Citizens and JP Morgan and closed on our transaction in July of 2014. On July 9th, we gathered together as a company in our beer hall in Boston. We had told our employees that the agenda was to discuss the first half of the year and make plans for the second half. We had kept the transaction quiet, but I'm sure some people noticed the unusual activity around the office during the preceding months. I invited some of the individuals who had helped us with the deal, bankers and lawyer types, to join us for the announcement. They became the strangers in suits standing along the wall, and they certainly made people realize that something big might be up. For a Harpoon crowd with open taps just feet away, it was an unusually quiet and anxious gathering. I started by telling them that I was sure they were aware of all the transactions going on in the industry and that they might have noticed that Rich and I had a bunch of gray hair, so some changes might be coming. I then told them that indeed I was there to announce a sale of the company and that I wanted to introduce them to the new owners of a large minority stake in the brewery. You could have heard a pin drop at this point. Finally, I asked them to turn to the people seated next to them and shake their hands because they were now all the new owners of 48% of Harpoon. It was a great moment, one I'll never forget. There were shouts and cheers and not a few tears. The 2.5 years since have been wonderfully challenging as we work hard to develop a fully engaged ownership culture and prove that employee ownership can work. Studies publicized by the National Center for Employee Ownership consistently show improvements in revenue growth, employment growth, and annual growth in sales per employee for employee-owned companies. According to surveys, there are approximately 7,000 ESOPs in the United States, covering just under 14 million employees. I think the stand we have taken is particularly important at this time in our country's economic history. And I want to close by spending a minute on this subject with you, the business leaders from Central Massachusetts. As President Obama said recently in The Economist magazine, it is important to remember that capitalism has been the greatest driver of prosperity and opportunity the world has ever known. My father used to say that the biggest threat to our free enterprise system is not going to come from Washington or Beacon Hill, but from too much greed on the part of those in the system. Without restraint, capitalism does not work well in a democratic society. 40 years ago, CEOs took home 20 to 30 times as much as their average worker. Today, that figure is over 200. We all know about inequalities. The top 1% and 10% have more than doubled their share of national income during the same time frame. How's that been working out? Do you think the country's better off? How about support for our free enterprise system? Certainly the election was not a high watermark for American democracy or much of anything else. Do you think anyone coming of age in the last 15 years thinks it's a great system with the housing crash, $20 trillion of debt, bank bailouts, crushing levels of student loans to repay, and stagnant wages? What can you and I do to help in this fight? Not much is a short answer, but we can each take a stand for less greed, for more fairness, and for more opportunity for everyone to share in the benefits of our great system. We need to make capitalism work for everyone. Work serves people, as Bill O'Brien used to say, not only as a means for earning a living, but also as a platform on which they can develop their talents and express their best selves. So as I looked out over that windy, cold roof in early 2015, I felt a great sense of pride in what we had built at Harpoon and a great warmth from the collective efforts of my fellow employee owners. I still do today. We have put our small stake in the ground. Love beer, love life, and cheers to independent craft brewing. Thank you very much.